Hey, I'm Alan Locher. This Pride show means a lot to me personally. June, as you know, is Pride Month, and this June marks the 50th anniversary of the 50th anniversary of the first Gay Pride March, which was held in New York City on June 28th, 1970. The event, officially known as the Gay Christopher Street Liberation Day March, was spearheaded by a group of activists for the first anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising. We have to remember that the rights we all possess today are a direct result of Black LGBTQ individuals who rioted at Stonewall and fought for equal rights in the years that followed. I'm so excited. My first two guests are Dr. Eric Cervini, who is an award-winning historian of LGBTQ+ politics and culture. He graduated summa cum laude from Harvard College and received his PhD in history from the University of Cambridge, where he was a Gates Scholar. And Michael Venturiello, who opened the doors to Christopher Street tours in June 2018. Michael wrote his graduate thesis on the impact of the Stonewall riots on college students. I'm thrilled to have them both here today to celebrate this historic anniversary. Please welcome Dr. Eric Cervini and Michael Venturiello. Gentlemen, oops, my apologies, there we go.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Hi, Jen.
Hello.
Thank you so
hello,
much.
hello.
Sorry about that. I got a little tongue-tied at the beginning. It happens. How's everybody doing?
Great. Happy to be here.
You
Thanks
both.
for having me.
Thanks for being here. I wanted to start by asking you both the same question, of course. What does pride mean to you personally? Eric, if you want to take your first stab.
Well, I'm so glad to be here, and also Michael with you. I'm primarily a specialist of pre-Stonewall activism, and so it's so nice to have someone who can give some more expertise on what happened afterwards. But I think both of us know that, as you mentioned, Alan, the very first Pride March was the year after Stonewall, almost to the day, 50 years ago from today. And that first march looked very different from what we now know and celebrate as Pride, in that it was a march of resistance. There was a full calendar the entire week of that first Christopher Street Liberation Day, or week rather, where they were picketing Governor Rockefeller's office for LGBTQ+ law reform. They were having workshops on political activism. All the dances and events were fundraising events. And so for me, Pride is about resistance, and it's about political activism. And I personally think that's what we need to bring back to Pride, especially as we reconstruct it for 2021.
That's great. And Michael?
Yeah, it's so great to be here again, just to emphasize that with Alan and Eric. And Eric, I appreciate you bringing that perspective of the resistance and the resilience of Pride and sort of the very first Christopher Street Liberation Day, because I think for me personally, that's so much of what this movement is really all about, is talking about resistance. And not only that, but resistance and then resilience. The community is certainly a resilient one, and it's been through a whole lot pre-Stonewall, but also since Stonewall, with gay liberation and the AIDS epidemic. And it's an amazing time to really come together as a community, both to remember the resistance and sort of how far we need to go as a community, but also to remember and to celebrate the achievements that we have. So I think for me, it's the combination of both of those things. It's recognizing how far we've come, but also remembering how far there is still to go, and working together in solidarity to get there.
It's true. I mean, we have come a long way, but there is still so much to be done. What was coming out like for you, or was it even an issue? I mean, you're both younger than I am, and I'm just curious. Was it, Michael, was it an issue? Was it a difficult process?
Yeah, I can speak to this. I think everybody has their own personal, individualized coming out story, which I think is really important to name, depending on your family status, your geographic location, several other factors. For me, it was a multi-layered coming out process, as I think it is for most folks, where you come out to maybe your best friend, and then you come out to your closest family, and then this whole thing. So for me personally, I think if we're talking about sort of where we are modern day, quote unquote, versus maybe, back during the first Pride, it still was an issue for me. I think for me, I had told a friend and I was sort of outed, which was a pretty traumatic experience. That's nothing that anyone wants to experience, is being outed before they are ready to be sort of openly identifying with their sexuality. But something that I do think is important to also name, what's great about giving tours to people that come from all over the country to see this LGBTQ history is there's a lot of young folks that feel especially inspired and empowered to see where they come from, where their queer roots really stem from. And I've had sort of this equal split where for some folks, they come out and it's no problem, quote unquote. Their family accepts them, their town accepts them. But something that I think is important to name on tour is I start by talking about sort of the oppressive pre-Stonewall era with different policies and laws that were sort of institutionalized against LGBTQ folks, where people didn't necessarily feel comfortable or safe to come out in their neighborhoods. But something that I always like to mention is that still exists today in 2020, unfortunately, for a lot of young people, where they might feel ostracized or they might feel like they're the only one in their school or in their place of employment that openly identifies as LGBTQ. So I think for me, I'm fortunate that although I was maybe outed a little earlier than I wanted to be, relatively speaking, I was accepted and loved by the people that were closest to me. But that certainly is not the case even still today. So I think that's important to remember.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And Eric, for you, was it?
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that multi-layered process of coming out and also the various forms of trauma that come along with it. And I'm originally from a town called Round Rock, Texas, right outside of Austin. And it was a pretty conservative town. And, I was closeted all through high school. And I think part of the reason why it took me so long, even though I had a very supportive family, very supportive friends and community, was I just didn't have a template for what it meant to be a queer person and to see a real live human who I actually knew and respected. And to not have that, I think is a tragedy. And I think that's why, coming out and celebrating Pride and having that visibility is so important, because you don't know who may be watching you on social media or who may be watching you on parades in your local town, and who may have a little bit more courage in order to be their authentic self because you are giving them that template. So I think that's why I'm so passionate about declaring my own pride and also fighting back, because I'm hoping that it'll encourage other people from other small towns in the South and elsewhere to come out as well.
But you're so right. It is so important because of each of our own individual story of coming out to celebrate, the fact that we did make it through that. And that to me is a lot about pride. We've all been through something that isn't always easy, and we weren't always told that it was okay to be gay. So that pride feeling, is something special. Eric, when I mentioned this to you backstage, but when I went to look at your website, it was incredibly powerful to me, because you have author, historian, homosexual, right there on the home page. What prompted you to add that? Was it something you went back and forth on to add homosexual?
Did I go back and forth on it? Maybe a little bit. I think the term is a little outdated, and I'm a historian of the 1960s pre-Stonewall activism, and that was the word they used, right? To be gay. That word gay was still an in-group term. It wasn't really used, at least in the public media. In newspapers, they would use the word homosexual. And I think there was, especially after Stonewall, a movement away from using that word. But in the book, to use any other term to describe activism during the 1960s would be a little anachronistic. So that's why I like to use it a little bit as a tongue-in-cheek, but also I think you have to embrace words that have been used in a derogatory sense, whether it's homosexual or queer, because it shows that we are taking the power away from those who are using those words in order to cause pain. And if we adopt those words and reclaim them for ourselves and say, I'm actually proud to be that word, then it removes the power of those who are trying to hurt us with those words. And I think that's a very, very powerful thing that's happened time and time again. The name of my book is The Deviant's War. And a lot of people assume when they first hear it that to be a deviant is a bad thing. But then you have to take a step back and ask, why is it a bad thing to deviate statistically from a norm? Who taught us that? Who taught us that it is bad to be different? And so I think language is a very powerful way for us to actually analyze some of these really deeply ingrained prejudices that we have even amongst ourselves as part of the queer community.
Oh, that's great. And that's it. Interesting. Yeah, I heard you talk about the title of the book and how, people think you're talking about a deviant,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Which I did not expect. I didn't expect people to think that, I was anti-deviant or anti-gay by choosing that title. But certainly the federal government, which I talk about in the book, they use that word to mean something negative. But the origin of that word was not negative. It was completely neutral. It meant simply a statistical deviation. And I think we should say, hey, I deviate from the norm, and I'm really proud of it because it makes me who I am.
Yeah, very proud of it. I was going to go into the Supreme Court decision, but I am curious, what prompted you to study pre-Stonewall history? Where did that, that idea or... Well, fascinating, because to be honest, until I heard you on Anderson Cooper, I didn't really think about much before Stonewall.
Right. Well, I mean, I think LGBTQ plus Americans have heard at least the word Stonewall, or maybe they know the name Harvey Milk, but certainly they don't know the name Frank Kameny, who's really the grandfather of the gay rights movement, and doesn't have his own film, doesn't have his own, landmark monument in Greenwich Village. And as a historian, especially in college, when I first heard his name and realized how important he was to our movement, yet there wasn't a book about him yet, it was that realization that there was still history that needed to be told, that these stories needed to be told. And actually, I wanted to kind of geek out a little bit and ask Michael about your dissertation, because I'm so curious about what you found about.
I was going to get to Michael.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm kind of taking over.
That's okay, because I want to know that. I want to know that too. But Michael, why don't you take that and we'll come back to the Supreme Court decision. Where did you get the idea to do your thesis on the impact of the Stonewall Uprising, for college students?
Yeah, it's a really good segue. So for me, I was sort of, an 18-year-old, went through college, wasn't really sure what to study, kind of was an RA, a tour guide, all of these higher education student affairs things. So I actually got my master's in higher education and student affairs. And as I grew older and started to become familiar with queer history, I very quickly realized that I wanted to gear as much of my study towards LGBTQ history as possible, even within the context of higher education. So I figured the turning point, as we say, the spark, quote unquote, of the gay rights movement was Stonewall. And I was curious how specifically that impacted college students. So it was sort of a random question that I thought I could just squeeze into the master's program that I was already studying within. But as we know, part of the reason why Stonewall was called the spark of the gay rights movement was just simply the amount of activism, the local grassroots momentum that came from that, including the extreme boost of organizations that were created after that incident or after those riots at Stonewall, including specifically the Student Homophile League, which first happened at Columbia, NYU, all of these campuses around the country, really, which essentially now is sort of like a GSA or a Gay Straight Alliance or any sort of like pride club on campus, started as the Student Homophile League. So as it turns out, the Stonewall riots really did have a major impact on college campuses and on young college students. And if we really look at the history of activism as a whole within the LGBTQ movement, but just in general, there's a lot of power and a lot of movement with young people in particular. So it made sense that these two ideas aligned. And ever since then, that's what really sparked Christopher Street Tours from that thesis.
And I will add, because I think it's so, which now makes sense for me, is why you offer LGBTQ youth free tours.
Yeah, that's a really big part of who we are and what we do. Our mission, we're talking about these stories and storytelling and sort of this forgotten history. So our mission is to share stories and uplift voices from those that paved the way before us. I think it's a really important way to honor people like Frank Kameny and others that people don't really know about as much as maybe the Marsha P. Johnsons or Sylvia Riveras of the world. But another part of our mission and another really big tenet is access to this history. So specifically, one of those points is free tours for LGBTQ youth, specifically because this isn't really anything that people learn about, K through 12 education. And even myself, I took an LGBTQ independent study in my college program. And it really wasn't until then that I really started to understand on a deeper level. And at that point, I was already, almost graduated with a college degree before I had really learned anything about LGBTQ history. So I think just by offering that experience and those free tours for LGBTQ youth, just by seeing themselves represented in history, by having that visibility, having that representation, I think that has a lot of power in that, and LGBTQ youth seeing themselves represented. It's a really powerful thing.
Totally. And we really don't learn any of this. I mean, like I just said to Eric, I didn't know about pre-Stonewall.
Right.
It was you, having that conversation with Anderson about your new book. Here I am 53, to just learn, I'm kind of sad that, it's taken me this long, but, now that's what I'm so glad you agreed to participate and talk with us. So let's go to the recent Supreme Court decision that bars discrimination against LGBTQ workers. We have the Black Freedom Movement to thank for many of our rights and freedoms, and how this started long before the Stonewall riots, because I know that's something, Eric, you can speak to, please.
Sure. I think not many people were expecting to wake up on, what was it, last Monday, to this decision, especially by one written by Neil Gorsuch. I don't think anyone really could have seen that coming. But then
any of us gay people, for sure.
Exactly, right. And also, I think everyone else kind of scratched their heads and said, "What do you mean that gay rights and trans rights aren't protected in 28 states? How could that possibly be true?" and so I'm glad you brought up the connection between the fight for gay liberation and the Black Freedom Movement, because what people don't realize is even though Stonewall was an essential catalyst for the explosion and scale of the pre-Stonewall movement, every step of the way, before Stonewall and after, the gay rights movement, the fight for LGBTQ plus equality, was borrowing from the Black Freedom Movement. And one of the most crucial figures that we should talk about, who I talked about with Anderson, was Bayard Rustin, who organized the 1963 March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr. declared, "I have a dream." Bayard Rustin was a gay Black man, and he was pretty much erased from history because of those two parts of his identity. So he didn't really have a place in the homophile movement or the gay liberation movement. And then also historians and Black activists, also because of his homosexuality, kept him in the background. And he was actually the victim of blackmail within the movement. And so it's important to tell Frank Kameny's story, to tell the story of Stonewall, but also to be telling the story of someone like Bayard Rustin, who organized that 1963 march. As a result, President Kennedy announced his devotion to signing a 1964 bill, which then was passed after his assassination and signed by LBJ, which was the result of a gay Black man. And that 1964 act with Title VII is the entire legal basis of the decision that came out last week. And so we have to be telling the story of gay rights and gay liberation in parallel with and intersecting with the fight for Black freedom as well.
And right now, a lot of people are making the connection between the Pride movement and the Black Lives Matter movement.
True. Yep. Absolutely. And I think you have to. And people are asking also, how do we celebrate Pride with no parades? And my answer has always been, you're seeing it. You're seeing it when, in Brooklyn, there was something like 30,000 people who marched declaring that Black trans lives matter. There was an equal number who marched down Hollywood Boulevard in Los Angeles. That is Pride. You started the question with what does Pride mean to you? It's resistance and fighting back and fighting for the most marginalized members of our community. And you're seeing that happening right now, and we have to keep marching.
And we're going to talk later. One of our is putting together a virtual Pride celebration on Sunday.
Wonderful.
For this, and to raise money for the Martha Institute.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that later. Let's segue to your New York Times bestseller. Let's talk about your book. Was it part of learning that history and wanting to get Frank's name out there that set you on that course?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I'm very transparent with people. Is what got me started in this world of gay history was watching the film Milk by the Oscar-winning screenwriter Dustin Lance Black, and watching that as originally I wanted to go to law school and be a lawyer and maybe work for the government or something, and then watching that film and realizing at the age of 20, 21 that how did I not know this story? How did I not know about this martyr? And then second, what other stories are out there that must be hidden? If I didn't know this one that is so crucial to the American story, what other names have been hidden from us and aren't taught in high schools or in colleges? And that's when Frank Kameni's name first popped up 7 years ago, and I dove in at the Library of Congress and haven't come up for air since. And so I'm so honored to be able to share his story and Bayard Rustin's story and Sylvia Rivera's story. And it's a daunting task, but I think one of the most rewarding.
And the book came out June 2nd. Are you getting feedback from people?
Yeah, it's you mentioned it was on the bestsellers list. It was, I believe, the first LGBTQ plus history book on the bestseller list since Randy Schiltz in 1993. Conduct Unbecoming. It's actually, I'm using the book. His books are very, very thick. They're thicker than mine, and I'm using them to prop up the laptop. So quite literally, like he is the foundation of all my work. So there have been amazing histories written in the past, but I'm just so grateful that people are there's demand for it now.
That's amazing. And you got to talk to Dustin Lance Black. I saw that. Yeah.
He's wonderful, and I'm so grateful that he kind of was my own catalyst for entering this world. And I told him when I first started chatting with him that I really blame him for for leading me down this path. So he's any struggle in that world I can attribute to him.
Well, that I really am curious about my own knowledge. I don't know that I knew much about Harvey Milk before that movie myself. I mean,
right.
That movie was incredibly powerful.
Absolutely.
Incredibly powerful. And many years ago already. Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. Michael, your company's been open 2 years. Unfortunately, now with the pandemic, it's a little hard to be giving tours. But I'm curious because you must, the guests on your tour, you must be hearing, from people around the country, around the world who have taken them. Any stories that you can share about what people, when they get to the Stonewall or Christopher Street? Anything you can share?
There's so much, I think. I always tell people at the beginning of tours that I'm certainly not an expert. I've done the research, but it's hard to be an expert in anything. And I say that to say, I think as much as people might be learning from me, I think I'm learning just as much from the people that come on my tours. I haven't been to nearly half the places that people have come on from tours. So to be able to learn a little bit more about what LGBTQ life looks like for those folks that visit New York and see Christopher Street and see Stonewall, it really is an amazing experience to know that people have come from all over the world to see this little tiny piece of land. And Stonewall, for its importance, it's really nothing more than just kind of like a gay bar, like the physical space of it. You know, you wouldn't know otherwise unless you knew the history. And of course, there's a little plaque that sort of explains it. But I think for me, what I've learned and sort of the overarching lesson is Pride really looks so different for so many different kinds of people. Specifically now, we're doing a lot of virtual events. So it's great because I still get to interact with people from around the world. And to know that for so many folks, Pride is just, it's just that, like it's having a sense of pride. It goes beyond the parade. So even though so many parades have been canceled because of COVID, that people still are experiencing the sense of pride, whether it's community or loved ones, a chosen family, however that looks like for them. I think that's something that I will always sort of remember and take away, is just that feeling of community around Pride, even without the parade in this particular instance. I think it goes back to the roots of what Pride really is. And in addition to resistance and protesting and marching, it really also centered around community and finding like-minded people who you were able to walk in community with and march in protest with. So to go back to that now 51 years later has been a really great lesson for me and a really great reminder.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And that's kind of why I wanted to do the show. We are in such a different time and we aren't able to go to the parade, to my favorite, the Pure Dance. This is a way to really shed some light on all of it for people. Before I let you go, Eric, I know are you still doing your Quarantini?
We put it on a brief pause as we did the book tour, just because we had 18 different digital events over the course of a week or two. And so we'll be back. I'll be posting, we just did an event last night with Representative Brian Sims of Philadelphia. And it was a wonderful conversation. So I think that'll be coming up tomorrow.
Tell people about the Quarantini.
Yeah, so right at the beginning of the quarantine, we started. My name's Eric CERVINI, and so it rhymes perfectly with Quarantini. And started a book and film club for the quarantine era, and started with Giovanni's Room by James Baldwin, and also the documentary How to Survive a Plague. So it's not too late if you just go to quarantini.lgbt. You can see all the recommendations that we've been making. For June, the pick. I had to be a little selfish. The pick is my book, so it's not too late to join in. But I have all intentions of continuing, and I'll be announcing the July book very soon.
And you created it, so I guess you're allowed.
I know. I still feel a little guilty about plugging it, but I gotta learn.
Well, you definitely should. Before we go, Eric, if I can ask, what do you think are one or two things our community can do in this moment to not forget the most marginalized?
Oh, thank you for asking that question, because I think I've been trying to end every appearance I make with the call to action, because so many people are wondering, how do we celebrate? How do we give back? How do we make up for some of our past mistakes as a community? And I think you mentioned already some great organizations that have been doing the hard work and have been fighting for the most marginalized for a while. So rather than doing something novel, I think amplifying and funding those organizations, including the Marsha P. Johnson Institute, the Sylvia Rivera Law Center, they are the ones who are on the front lines and have been on the front lines for years and years. And it's time that we now put our money where our mouth is and donate and protect, especially Black trans lives.
That's awesome. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here, for being my first guest on my first Pride show. So can't thank you enough. Don't forget to check out Dr. CERVINI's book, The Deviant War, The Homosexual versus the United States of America. And when you get to New York City, please check out Michael's tours, Christopher Street Tours. Don't forget to check them out when we're back allowed out in public. Michael, Eric, thank you. Happy Pride, gentlemen.
Happy Pride. Thanks so much, Alan.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye, guys. Okay.
Oh,
sorry. Hi, Robert.
hi.
I'll let you on. And Ivan, so let me do an introduction. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that, but hey, it's live.
Hi.
So here we go. My next guests have both traveled the world reporting on some of the best places to travel. Traveling IQ's Ivan Quintanilla is a professional actor and travel writer who believes every step out the front door is an opportunity to learn a little more about a place, a person, a culture, ourselves. He's appeared on TV episodes of Gotham, The Blacklist, Law and Order, Blue Bloods, to name just a few. Ravi around the world, Ravi Roth, has been traveling the globe since he was 24 and has been to 31 countries. Ravi, like Ivan, is also an actor who studied at the Boston Conservatory. He's been seen across the country and in New York in Altar Boys, Seussical, Irving Berlin's White Christmas, and Fiddler on the Roof. Gentlemen, happy Pride. Thank you so much for being here.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Thanks for having us, Alan.
Well, thank you for being here, and I love the flag behind you, Robbie. I should have
Oh,
done
you know, I have to like, you know, create a little ambiance.
It's good ambiance.
I've got a cat.
Yeah, your cat.
Oh,
Is that the new cat that just traveled here?
I'm sorry.
Is that the new cat that just arrived?
This is the new cat that just arrived like 2 weeks ago. So she's the newest part of the family, and she's settling in quite nicely.
Oh.
She's very, very chill. So
What's her name?
Ruthie.
Okay, Ruthie. Hi, Ruthie. So, gentlemen, as I asked the other folks, Eric and Michael, what does pride mean to each of you? Ravi, I know I saw some of what you wrote earlier, but why don't you take it away?
Yeah, sure. So, you know, I've always said that pride means to like authentically live out loud. And I'm a big believer in celebrating the fact that the generations before us have really paved the way for my generation, which is the millennials, and the generations beyond me, the Gen Zers and the little teeny bops before them, so that they can really be themselves. But like, as we all know, right now, a lot has shifted in the last couple of months, and it's really been happening for a long time. But I think we are really waking up to it all now. And you know, we can't all be equal until we are all equal. And it's something that I've been really thinking about and hearing and seeing and learning. And our Black trans brothers and sisters and our non-binary, our gender non-conforming friends, they are not equal right now. Like, there's not equality for all of us across the board. So pride to me really is an umbrella of all being equal, all being able to live out loud, all being able to live our truth, and all having the same amount of rights.
Ivan?
Yeah, I mean, I ditto everything Ravi said and what your other guests, Eric and Michael, said, who were great. One of the big things that I think about Pride for this year is that it does feel very different. And whereas like last year, it was World Pride here in New York, and it was a celebration of the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. And it seemed like so much of the focus was on the parties, which is still important. I still love a good party, but also on kind of the history of where we've been, because we were tracking the 50 years since Stonewall. And I feel like from last year to this year, the focus seems to be, and rightfully so, is moving forward. And I think it's what we can do now and the steps that we have to take, like Ravi said, to help the other members of our community and the more marginalized members of our community that haven't had the voice and haven't had the privilege that we've had. And so it's kind of an exciting time, because we're actually, I think, hopefully going to try to move the dial forward, and we're going to focus on the things that we need to do and the people. We have. Yes.
We have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true. Would you mind talking about coming out for each of you? What was that like? Was that?
Yeah. You know, I'm from a very, very liberal, hippie, be yourself type of, you know, we were the token Jews in town. I wasn't out, but we were the token Jews. So we had, you know, but when I did come out for my family, it was not, there were no role models. I thought that when I was in high school, if you're gay, you're a child molester. I never knew that being gay could be normal. I never knew that being gay could be accepted, that was even an option. So I did come out on an airplane by accident to my family my freshman year of college, which I turned into a one-man show because it was so ridiculous. And, you know, my parents were not super supportive at the time. They made a huge scene. The whole plane heard everything, and it was really traumatic and an awful experience of coming out. But, you know, it's their biggest regret to this day. that all being said, you know, there's no right time and there's no rule book. Clearly, don't do it on an airplane. That's one suggestion. But you
That's
know,
a new place. I don't know if I've heard that one before, to be honest.
oh yeah, no, it was, and then like I came out to my friends officially on Yom Kippur, my freshman year. But yeah, so that's my coming out story. It was in high school, totally dated the girls and got bullied for being gay all the time. And you know, I feel like that's like a story that we all hear. But you know, it definitely affects you into, you know, later in life. But everyone's supportive in my family now, which is great. And clearly, I'm pretty fucking gay.
I'm glad to see that.
Yeah.
And you, Ivan?
Well, my story is definitely not as extra as Ravi's, but you know, nothing that I do could ever be as extra as Ravi. Mine is a little kind of more traditional coming out story. I started coming out to my good friends in high school, but I wasn't out in my high school. And then I decided when I was going away to college that I was like, okay, I didn't want to have the coming out process with new people. So I just decided, okay, from this moment on, from day one of college, I am gay. If it comes up, which inevitably, I was a theater major, of course it came up. I was just going to be out from that moment on. And then, you know, little by little, I started kind of filling my family in. I had a very specific plan. I came out to my sister during Thanksgiving break so she could be there as a support system for my mother when I came out to her over Christmas break. You know, I'm a planner, so I kind of planned it all that way. And everyone's fine now. It took a little while. You know, Cuban family from Miami, they're crazy in their own way, but they're lovely and they're very supportive of me now. So,
but they're loving, and that's what matters.
Yes.
So, travel bloggers, what inspired both of you to, you know, go that route?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm a vlogger with a V. So I do like more so video content. And I kind of got into all that by accident. You know, I moved to New York to be an actor on the Broadway and got to do some really cool shows here. And then I left the country for the first time with my ex. I proposed on this trip. And we went to Paris, London, Barcelona. And my brother, who's also a big travel dude, he was like, you should journal. And I said, absolutely not. And he said, well, you should videotape. So I did, you know, I did it like this, vertical, not horizontal. And came up with like, put it together. I had no idea. I used iMovie, like put together a little shitty video that was kind of funny. And my talent manager was like, you can have a travel show. This is really funny. And then it went from funny to like, what's the format? And what's like, how do you do it horizontally? So I kind of just like did it by accident and then went to a couple cities and then taught myself how to edit, taught myself everything. And then came up with a really cool structure with my team. And now here I am, like 31 countries later, and getting to really explore these incredible cities around the world, but not being, I mean, obviously I am the centerpiece in that, like, I am the vlogger and I am the person behind the camera, but it's really about sharing the stories of the people that live in these cities and finding out what lights them up, what gives them life and energy, why people want to travel there, because there wasn't something that really existed in a video context before that in a way that excited me. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Well, that's why I loved your description, Ivan, about, you know, every step out the front door, it is an opportunity to learn, meet people, a culture. So is that sort of what inspired you to do it?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Ravi, I moved to New York to be an actor, and I was at a point where I, was kind of looking for something else to be inspiring and to inspire me and be creative in some way, and I wanted travel to be a bigger part of my life. So I started travel writing. I took a travel writing course, and then I started a blog, and then from there I started pitching and writing for other people, and it's such a fantastic way to kind of get you out of your world and part of why I say that every step out the door is an opportunity to explore, because we can't always go to the most fabulous places, whether we don't have the money or we don't have the time. And now we're kind of all stuck in our homes because of the current situation. So it's really easy, and the world just looks different when you're actually going out and seeking it out and looking to explore, and you find these little details in just everyday life that you otherwise wouldn't. And I think that's what makes travel so interesting for me, trying to find those moments in other places as well. So
traveling is the best. I mean, that's the hardest part, the lockdown. What are some of the cities, since we're talking and this show is dedicated to Pride, that you have both celebrated Pride in and would recommend for others who are watching to go and experience?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. I went to Cape Town, South Africa Pride, and it was so cool. I mean, first of all, going to Cape Town, South Africa in general, it's a little pricey to get there, but once you're there, it's super affordable. And their Pride was like super quaint, and so full of life. And it like took over this field, and then we went down to a bunch of the bars, and there were like drag shows, great food, a beach vibe. I mean, just like a stunning landscape. You can have it be a crazy wild party time, or you can make it super chill and do a lot of hikes. I kind of like did both. And that was one of my favorite prides outside of New York, obviously. And I have to say, also, I went to Laguna Beach / Orange County Pride, and it was super small but mighty and very vibrant. You think of like Orange County and the hills and like super bougie, but it was really a lot of down to earth people. One bar that closed that reopened for the Pride festivities, one little street fair, and it was really cute. And like sometimes I feel like those smaller, more intimate cities and vibes for Pride really get it back to the root of like, what is this that we're celebrating? Those too.
Yeah, I love small prides, and I love like small communities. I think the communities come together so much more when it's a smaller town. You have one bar, you have no other option, and you have 10 gay friends, and they're going to be your friends. But some of my favorite prides are Amsterdam, because once Amsterdam is like a gay mecca of the world, and it's fantastic. And the Pride actually happens on the canal, so the floats are actually floating. They're all boats, and the whole entire city comes out. People of all ages. You see grandparents holding up signs. It's a really, really sweet experience. And another one that I loved that I visited last year for the first time was Guadalajara. And Guadalajara is the second largest city in Mexico. So it's a very, very large city. And I actually got to ride in one of the floats. It was kind of a really interesting perspective to see the Pride happening while you're on the float, and it was like mayhem. The streets were packed, the sidewalks were packed. People were like jumping up and down on the floats. I mean, it was crazy, but like in the best way. And I think part of what made it so exciting is that though Guadalajara is a really large city and has a really vibrant gay community, it is the largest city for many towns within 2 or 3 hour drive. So like people from all over that state, come over to Guadalajara Pride. And it was like an expected 100,000 people. It was so crowded, and everybody was having such a great time. And it ends like in this big plaza. It was, I would definitely recommend it when you can go.
I was engaged in Amsterdam, and my parents are Dutch.
Oh,
so I would love to experience. They have something called King's Day or Queen's Day, which is very similar.
Yes.
Everyone's out on the canal, but I would love to experience Pride in Amsterdam and Tel Aviv.
That's on the list.
Yeah, that's on the list. Do you have a favorite place you've traveled to?
Me?
Yeah.
I mean, I have so many. For me, it's kind of like Sophie's choice. I've actually never been to a place where that I haven't enjoyed or appreciated in some sense. So, but the first place that comes to mind is Valencia. And I think it was one of my very first really large trips that I wrote about. And Valencia is the third largest city in Spain. And it's a little bit of, it's a city of a lot of surprises. It's got a historic old town that you would expect with the cathedral. And then it has this like crazy, amazing, modern Calatrava portion of the city that he's created. And Calatrava is the architect that has done the World Trade Center hub here in New York City. And it's called the City of Arts and Sciences, I believe. And it's much like our transportation hub. It's all these really crazy buildings that look like whales and like ribs, and just it's really interesting. And then it's also in the Mediterranean. So you have the old town, the new town, and you just happen to be on the Mediterranean, and it's the birthplace of paella. So it's like check, 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 check.
Always comes back to food, doesn't it?
Food, always. You can't go wrong.
Especially when you travel.
Yes.
And Ravi, for you, a top?
Oh, okay. I'd say I really, really loved Santiago, Chile. Mainly like Santiago itself, cool city, but you go there to like really go to the outskirts. So it's a super quick day trip to Valparaiso, which is beautiful street art and the most insane murals I've ever seen in my life. You go the opposite direction, or any direction really, you get to the Andes Mountains, and it's like mountains that are just take your breath away, and incredible workouts. You can bike the city of Santiago. I probably should have learned a little Spanish. 98% of the people don't speak Spanish or don't speak English, so I had a little trouble, but they were so kind, and like Google Translate was perfect. So I loved Santiago. I wish I could have gone. It's as long as the entire our entire continent. It's super long, but I only got to really stay in Santiago and like that immediate outskirts. But that was definitely one of my favorites. And then Istanbul. I mean, just the architecture of Istanbul and the underground gay scene, and it's like what really lit me up to like dive into creating content, because it just wasn't there. It wasn't in Istanbul. There wasn't anything that had places where you can go. And it's not like gay bars are the only thing you can do, but at least like finding people that are, family, and learning about the culture there was fascinating. So I loved that, and the architecture. Architecture gets me. My little.
Yeah, architecture was pretty special in places. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. Let's hope we all get to travel again very soon. But I can't thank you enough for joining me today on this show. It means a lot.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Bye, guys. See you soon. All righty. One more guest. And here we go. Due to the coronavirus, as many of you know, over 475 Pride events, including the New York City Pride March and my all-time favorite event, the Dance on the Pier, have been canceled. But my next guest, Jake Lever, Jake's a New York City banker, millennial influencer, and activist, and Jake and some of his friends, along with the nonprofit Your Neighbor's Backyard, are hosting a virtual pop-up show on Gay Pride Sunday, supporting Black Pride that will raise awareness and money for the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. So please help me welcome Jake Lever. Hey, Jake.
Thank you, Alan. That was such a good introduction. Did you write that, or did I?
I did, but you helped a little there. How you doing? Happy Pride.
I'm doing well. I'm dragging my parents through this, so they're watching, my brother and his wife, and both my parents and some of my friends. So I appreciate that, because we expect a lot from them, but it's also an education process, and we need to, you can't just expect things and not talk them through and tell them what's going on. And so I thought this would be interesting for them to listen into, because I hope we can kind of talk about, my state of mind over the past couple of weeks and what's been driving the cause for this event.
Definitely want to do that. So let's start with the question I've started with everybody: what Pride means to you?
Yeah.
And
so all your guests so far
too.
Yeah. So all your guests so far have been like really politically correct, and that resistant. I mean, I was learning so much from your first two guys. I've traveled, so I know that, but hearing them talk about LGBTQ history, I lack in that department for someone who loves history. So I kind of like their answers, but to be completely candid, Pride to me was a party until a month ago. I never thought more about it. I felt privileged. I felt like entitled, like I get to party because I'm gay, and my life's been harder, so I get to go to work late on Monday And it really wasn't until, I mean, we'll get into this, but until, the recent events with Black Lives Matter, that I understood that that kind of celebration of pride is no longer acceptable. And it's been a learning process. And, with that, I've tried to use my, resources and come together and brainstorm ways that we can actually effectively celebrate pride, or bring light to the issues that need to be addressed right now. So for me, pride was a party, and for now it's a learning experience. It's a learning process. And, just listening, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to listen to the beginning of your interview because I had some work stuff going on, but I had it on in the background. And this is pride to me, hearing, Eric and Michael, speak through, what they've learned through their courses and through their community work is kind of what I want to be getting at, and what I want to, take away from this year's Pride. And I know that I've been so impressed with my friends because they feel the same way. When we hear something new that we didn't know about about gay liberation, or about Sylvia, or about Marsha, we are sharing with each other immediately because it's so interesting to us. I mean, we went our whole lives without knowing the figures who kind of awarded us our civil rights today. We didn't even know they existed. I mean, I'm going to admit it. Like, to whoever's watching, I did not know who Marsha P. Johnson was a month ago. I studied politics. I studied history at a top 20 university. I did not know who Marsha P. Johnson was.
I knew because, as I told you, my husband had watched the documentary, but I had not. And until you and I spoke, I went and watched it. And then I also watched Laverne Cox's Disclosure.
I tried to watch last night. I fell asleep.
But yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, like I said to Eric, I did not know there was really a movement before Stonewall.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, and I recommend everyone watches the documentary, but it's very representative of what's going on now. You had the people who kind of fought for our gay rights, the Black, trans, femme, queer people, doing the initial riots, the initial protests. Marsha's rumored to be the one that threw the first brick. 4 years later, they're completely kicked out of the movement. And you can really see the parallels with, Black rights in America, and how, they were the ones fighting for civil rights for centuries. And yet, when we talk about women equality and gay equality, we've left Black people behind. I have examples of just like, you hear corporations like celebrating Pride and having like the rainbow stickers in the lobby and giving out everyone with rainbow stickers. But we really can't be doing that unless we've done that and completed that with our Black employees, and we haven't. And so just bringing awareness to that disparity is like what we're trying to do right now. I'll be the first one to admit I don't know as much as the other guys about the history.
Me neither.
But what I can tell you is that we're aware of our status in society. We're aware of our connections, and we're aware of our clear ability to raise money right now. And so, we want to try to just do something right with that right now.
Well, as you said to me, you're a millennial, but to speak to your parents who are listening, I mean, I was really impressed at what you did with the recent grassroots effort, where you donated $5 for every donation that you got for 2 charities, which was the Amy McGrath, who's running against McConnell in Kentucky, and for Black trans protesters emergency fund. And you raised over $5,300
in 8 hours. Yep.
Yeah, in 8 hours.
Yeah. So that was
that your first time being an activist?
Yeah. So like that was my first time. Well, I mean, I posted videos and I posted articles, but that was my first time, I would say, kind of like taking actual action. It was weird. Like I woke up one morning and I was like, I need to do something a little more. I'm a very hyper productive person in the mornings. I can accomplish more before 8 a.m. than most people accomplish in a day. And I was like, why don't I do $1 match and it was the night after, it was the day after Trump had just gassed the protesters in Lafayette Park. I was really bothered by that whole thing because I've been out with the rallies, and they're so peaceful and they're so beautiful, and you're learning, and it's like a history lesson. It's like you can't get enough of it. And so when you see your president go up,
Bible photo shoot.
So initially I was going to do just like, I'll match $1 for every donation someone does to Amy McGrath. And then I was like, that's $1. Like I was willing to budget more. And then I was like, well, Jake, you're kind of missing the point here too. Like, it's about Mitch and it's about politics, but like, it's also about Black lives. And so I gave my followers 2 options, and we, I think I was tracking it in Excel, and the numbers were going up, and people were seeing, like the numbers throughout the day. And, this was all like on the go. I was working. It was just cool. It was fun. Everyone was included, very interactive. It was a great experience. And then I got to give a shout out to a couple people who I might also be listening to. My best friends, John and Kente. John is white and works in a union, and Kente is Black and has taught me so much in the past couple months. We're all working together on this event. John has really pushed me to use my Instagram for better reasons, because he sees how I think, and he sees the causes I'm interested in, and he wants more from me than just posting cute selfies.
Mm-hmm. Well, you definitely,
so
that first one was definitely a huge success. So talk about the inspiration for this Sunday's event, and I will put up how people can donate as well.
Sure. So after that fundraiser, we were like, we got to keep going. We got to capitalize on the momentum. So we got together as a group, people of different backgrounds from different communities. And John, my friend, introduced us to your neighbor's backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And your neighbor's backyard, what they do is they showcase, local artists, musicians, bands in backyards, and they every different show they choose a charity to partner with. And we were very grateful to be connected with them. I mean, this has been an amazing process over the past 2 weeks working with them and learning from them and each other. But the genesis of the whole thing was, it was a brainstorming session. It was, okay, so we're going to try to raise money. We want it to be LGBT focused, but we really want this to be a Black Lives Matter issue.
Mm-hmm.
You could see with our logo, we have Black Pride in the JPEG, and Black Pride is actually a real thing. In August, there is supposed to be a Black Pride. And so it was, do we wait
again,
till August?
Something I never knew.
Yeah, me too. I learned it that night.
Yeah.
So it was like, do we wait till August, or do we just capitalize on the momentum we have now and kind of do something together? We originally had some like, we had choices that we were going to give people the option. There was like a Black equity, we liked how that sounded to a lot of people who would be potentially like big donors, like the word equity was in it. And we kind of, we were going back and forth on which would be the right one. And we didn't leave the first meeting with a concrete answer. Again, we all went home. We're all feeling the energy, and we live in Brooklyn. We're in the epicenter of the Black Lives Matter movement, and we're all self-educating. And we watched the Marsha P. Johnson documentary, and for me, it was just like riveting, like to know that these were the original activists, to know that they were people of color. Sylvia's 1973 speech. I mean, we're interested in this stuff. These are our interests, and the fact that we didn't know about it and they made such an impact in such a short little time, it kind of naturally came together that we would go towards Marsha. And it's interesting because the more people that I reach out to from my from elementary school, from high school, from college, from my first job, like the more you start having these conversations, the more people are saying, oh, I donated to Marsha P. Johnson already. Oh, I watched that documentary. So it's like, it's having this impact on a lot of people. And so I feel like we definitely got the organization right, because people are really excited to be.
I would be really curious to see, which I'm sure we won't from Netflix, but to know in this time frame
how many people
have already been watched.
Yeah,
a lot more. Can you tell the folks listening about Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson, what you learned and why their impact is so important?
Yeah. Thank you for kind of challenging me a little bit to put that into words. But it was really unclear if they were trans or if they were drag or if they were gay. That you can read a lot about them and it's still a little bit ambiguous. I think they definitely use feminine pronouns. But they were, I think if you ask me, and I was talking to my friends about this, they were activists in different ways. Like Marsha was the person who would walk down the street and make everyone feel warm and welcome. Oh, doll, take my scarf. Oh, doll, have this.
Yeah.
And she really kind of owned the neighborhood. Whereas Sylvia was a fighter. Sylvia had like angst in her. Sylvia was angry with people. And so, you know, people have different takeaways from the documentary. Sylvia was a better activist. Well, she wasn't murdered and she lived a lot longer of life, so her impact might be easier to measure. But if you look at like queer culture and you kind of look at, you know, how people act and speak and talk, it's Marsha. And so their impacts are equally as important, if you ask me, and in different ways. And you see that later on in the documentary. Sylvia lives a longer life, and she goes international. And I can't remember what country it was, but it was a European country, and she must have had a crowd.
Oh, in Italy, I think it was.
Italy. It was Italy, yeah. And it was like mind blowing.
Mind blowing.
And Sylvia also, her 1973 speech, when she's yelling at all the white muscle gay boys to shut the F up so that she can get a word in, and she says, your gay brothers, your gay sisters, all them in prison, they're all calling me, you know, I'm the one they want to talk to. They come to Star House, which was her alliance, her organization. And she was like, you know, she was barely given the mic. And by the end of her 6-minute speech, she was getting a standing ovation. And she kind of like reclaimed, you know, gay liberation for.
I highly recommend that people watching to find Sylvia's speech, because it is something to see.
They called her Mystica, I believe. Another tidbit. And, you know, it's nice because I have another good friend, Jade, who's watching. She always knew more about gay history from me. She had an uncle who unfortunately passed from AIDS. And I always found that like extremely powerful. It was something I always wanted to know more about as a young person, just because I knew I was gay. But she brought up a really interesting point too. Like, she wrote her high school and college theses on gay history, gay social movements, and it was all about the gay men's health crisis, but it was never about gay liberation, and it was never about these characters and figures who actually, you know, did the dirty work for civil rights. And so, you know, it's like, it's crazy, like how this pop-up or virtual show is like reconnecting me with people from when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and they're sharing information with me, and we're sharing information with them, and we're becoming this like network of people that we're going to get older in our careers. You know, Jade and John and Brittany and whoever, who we're all sharing information now. We're all going to be leaders of CEOs and lawyers and doctors, and we're going to be the next generation. And the fact that we're kind of connecting now, getting our values synced up, getting on the right side of the issue,
the right
is
side
really
of history,
important.
the right side of history.
Yeah.
It's interesting, you know, because, you know, like I said, I mean, we did, you know, we don't learn this as a gay boy in school. You don't learn anything about your own history.
No.
You know?
No, you don't.
And that's a tragedy for us, really. You know, and really, you know, for the Black Lives Matter movement, for us to not know that we have our rights because they paved them for us.
Yeah. And it's like, it's no longer appropriate to just ignore that and leave them behind while we go to, you know, the peer dance. And yeah, of course, peer dance is multiracial. There's tons of Black people, but that's at peer dance. What happens the next day
when they go home?
You know, I was blown away. My company did a panel and they interviewed very professional, not that it matters, but professional Black people who have the same job as me. And these are people who are getting on Zoom calls every day, and people are asking them how they are. Forget the last 3 weeks, their whole lives. And they have to kind of put this face on that everything is okay when the discrimination they're experiencing, when we have the same job, same socioeconomic status, they're feeling it at the gym, they're feeling it at the YMCA. This is in New York City.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the stories you've heard I've heard them over the years, but you really have heard the stories now of, you know, a mom teaching her son that, you know, if he's going to go shopping, he needs to make sure he walks out of that store with a receipt in his hand, because.
So we never even had we never even thought about the idea of that conversation. No. Like my parents never had to sit me down and tell me how to really interact with cops. Like that was never even a conversation in our household. But go even deeper than that, just even thinking about that being a conversation was not even, I mean, until 3 weeks ago, you know, like I don't think we really, as my generation of kind of these, you know, whatever we want to call ourselves, really put ourselves into the shoes of our Black friends and really said to ourselves, what is it like for them to go out with their family to a restaurant? mean, I'm going to go on over time, but for example, there was another video of a black family in Baltimore being refused to get into a restaurant. And it was because of dress code, when there was a white boy with the same dress code or same gym shorts. So I went on the restaurant's website and I looked at what the dress code said. And it said no baggy or no pants below waist. And I was like, well, that's discriminatory because we know who that's targeting. And it's like, well, where did the pants below the waist come from? This slagging thing. It came from prison. And we know that prison is a system that's extremely arbitrarily discriminatory towards black people.
Mhm.
So now we're creating these systems that like, and then it's so easy for us to say, oh, it's the dress code. They don't let me in. Well, let's like relook at why there's dress codes in the first place. Why do country clubs have dress codes? It's to keep people of color out. So we need to be like talking about this. We don't need to solve everything overnight, but we need to be having these conversations and like definitely as young people, like aware that this is happening all the time.
It's great what you're doing. So let's just take it back
Yeah,
to
about the event.
the event. Tell us what you're planning for the event.
Yeah, so it's got to be COVID. We're still following those rules, COVID, social distancing. So it's going to be virtual. You can watch the event from my Instagram. It's up on the screen, or no, it's not, but we can get it up.
I'll put it back.
Or at, you have the other one? That or at YNB_community.
Yeah, I don't have that, but I had.
That's fine. You could get it on mine. What we're going to do is we have some of our good friends are in this awesome band. It's like we call it a jam sesh, and they kind of improv. In a non-COVID environment, if you can play an instrument, if you can sing, you just join in, and it's very, casual and fun. So we're going to have the jam session, but we're also going to have a comedian, a rapper, and a drag queen. And we're going to show it. We're going to live stream it, and all the while raising money for the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. With that note, I wanted to give you an update. We've raised almost $6,500. $6,500.
Justin's posting it on social media.
Justin's 1 week. So I mean, I'm not like taking, this is a group effort. There's a lot of people now, friends of friends, family, mentors.
Anybody watching, go to Jake's page, share the info on your own page. Again, it's about educating other people. Up here, you can Venmo the money to YNB-nonprofit or go to ynbackyard.com, donate, and select the Martha P. Johnson Institute. And you said you chose Martha's Institute because you felt she was the leader there?
Because like the image of Marsha was so prevalent in all of our minds, but if you actually go through their mission statement.
Sorry, I think I said Martha.
It's okay. What you like, think about who needs help the most. Who are the most marginalized people right now? Mm-hmm. Black trans people. They're part of our community. So that was easy for us to identify. It was like these are
marginalized, and Black trans women are the most victimized. So it's really
exactly. And it was similar to the original fund I did on my Instagram with the matching. We did the Black Trans Emergency Protesters Funds, which helped Black trans women with bail money, with food, with whatever kind of they needed to kind of weather the storm right now. And I think it's been pretty amazing to see the solidarity amongst not just LGBTQ community members, but people of all backgrounds, all ages, all races coming out for this very marginalized group of people. I mean, like, they get killed, like, for just, they're humans. And, if the more we talk and say that, the better it will become. So
when you
that's what we're trying to do.
Disclosure is really something to see too, because it's, it just dives, I think, a little deeper, but
I can't wait to watch. Yeah, I'm excited
into that. Well, Jake, thank you so much. I wish you.
Thank you. I appreciate you putting this together.
I've already donated. So,
I know.
And
thank you so much. Wait, one last thing about Marsha. I'm getting texts from my friends. They want me to say that the institute we're fundraising for is protecting the civil rights of Black trans women.
Great. Yeah, that's. I'm so glad you did. Say it again.
Protecting the civil rights of Black trans women.
That's awesome.
Alan, thank you for putting
You're
this
so
together.
welcome. Thanks so much
being so supportive.
I'll talk to you later.
All right, take care.
Happy Pride.
Yeah, you too. Bye, Alan.
Bye. Thanks, everybody. I hope you had Good time today, learned something. I just want to say thanks for joining me. I think it's really important to remember that Black lives matter and Black trans lives matter. And let's appreciate the impact that Black LGBTQ individuals had on our movement. In the spirit of our community standing together, I wanted to share a really beautiful song I just heard and video that I found inspiring. Happy Pride, everybody.
We ought to be happy that other people, including gays and lesbians and many other people, have imitated the Black movement for human rights. We ought to be proud of that we served as an example to others.
I've been thrown in jail for gay liberation.
If we want to develop an intersectional perspective, the trans community is showing us the way.
When the world feels dark and we're torn apart, distance feels like all we got. But I know one day this will disappear, so I won't give up, and I will not fear, 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 and I will not fear. I keep holding on to hope. 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 This will disappear, so I won't give up, and I will not fear. I keep holding on to hope. I keep holding on to hope. I keep holding on to hope. Oh, yeah. I keep holding on to hope.